You bought an electric car to escape the repair bills, the maintenance headaches, and the breakdowns. Less complexity, longer life, that was the deal. But some early EV owners watched their range cut in half before they even hit 80,000 miles. No accidents, no abuse, just a battery that wasn't built for the world it was sold into. This is what happened, and what it quietly changed about every EV on the road today. Here's what the data actually shows before we get into the failures. A study tracking over 22,700 electric vehicles found that modern EV batteries degrade at roughly 1.8 to 2% per year. Recurrent, which has monitored more than 250 million miles of real-world EV driving, found the same thing. Across all years and models, fewer than 4% of EV batteries have ever been replaced, and that includes cars that are now over a decade old. So the broad picture is actually encouraging. Most EV batteries are holding up better than anyone predicted. But that number under 4% hides something important. For first-generation EVs, the ones built before the industry had fully figured this out, the replacement rate jumps to 8.5%. That's more than double the overall average. And for some models, in some climates, the real-world experience was far worse than that number suggests. Most EV batteries are becoming quite successful stories. But a few became something else entirely. Cautionary tales that reshaped how the entire industry thinks about battery design, thermal management, and long-term durability. Those are the ones worth understanding. Why some early EV batteries struggled. The first generation of electric vehicles didn't fail because the engineers were careless. They failed because nobody had done this before at scale, and the gaps in the technology only showed up after hundreds of thousands of real-world owners started driving in real-world conditions. Three things were missing from most early battery systems. First was proper cooling. Lithium-ion batteries are sensitive to heat in ways that compound over time. High temperatures accelerate every harmful chemical reaction inside the cell. Electrolyte breakdown, cathode material degradation, SEI layer growth. Without active thermal management, keeping the pack within a safe operating range, heat became a slow, invisible enemy that the early batteries had no real defense against. The second was advanced battery management software. Modern battery management systems are constantly monitoring cell temperatures, voltage levels, and charge rates, adjusting behavior in real time to protect the pack. Early systems were far more basic. They couldn't catch problems early, couldn't throttle charging behavior when conditions were dangerous, and couldn't protect individual cells from drifting out of balance. The third was long-term durability testing. These were genuinely new products. Automakers had lab data, but they didn't have 10 years of field data from hundreds of thousands of cars being driven in Phoenix in August, or in Southern Europe, or anywhere else where sustained heat was going to be part of the daily equation. The real-world stress testing happened after the cars were already sold. The result was a generation of batteries that worked well under the conditions manufacturers had anticipated and degraded quickly under the ones they hadn't. The Nissan Leaf problem. If you want one example that it captures everything wrong with first-generation EV battery design, it's the early Nissan Leaf. The Leaf launched in 2010. It was genuinely groundbreaking, affordable, practical, mass-produced. Nissan sold tens of thousands of them, and for owners in mid-climates with moderate driving habits, many of those cars held up reasonably well. But in hot climates, the story was completely different. Owners in Arizona, California, Texas, and other warm regions started reporting significant range loss far earlier than anyone had been told to expect. Cars that launched with 84,000 miles of rated range were reading 60, 50, sometimes 44 miles. Not after 150,000 miles, but sometimes after fewer than 50,000. Some owners reported losing multiple range bars within the first 2 years of ownership. The core problem came down to one critical design decision. The early Leaf had no active thermal management system, no liquid cooling, no way to actively regulate battery temperature during charging or driving. The pack relied on passive air cooling, which is another way of saying it relied on ambient temperature, which in Phoenix can sit above 110 degrees for weeks at a time. Battery science is clear on what heat does to lithium-ion cells. It accelerates the growth of the SEI layer, which consumes active lithium and increases internal resistance. It causes cathode materials to dissolve into the electrolyte. It speeds up every secondary reaction that prematurely reduces capacity. and without any active cooling system managing pack temperature, the Leaf's battery was absorbing all of that heat with no relief. Nissan eventually acknowledged the issue, added a battery capacity warranty, and redesigned the thermal management system in later generations. But for the ones who had already bought the early cars in hot climates, the damage was done. The Leaf became the clearest early proof that battery chemistry alone wasn't enough. The environment the battery lived in mattered just as much as the cells themselves. Before we continue, hit the subscribe button if you want more content that actually gets into what's happening inside your EV, not just the surface level takes. When battery recalls changed everything. Not every early EV battery failure came from heat or chemistry, some came from the factory. Two of the most significant battery recalls in EV history involved the Chevrolet Bolt EV and the Hyundai Kona Electric, and both traced back to manufacturing defects in cells supplied by the same manufacturer, LG Chem. The Hyundai Kona recall affected more than 76,000 vehicles worldwide. The problem was a potential short circuit after a full charge. Hyundai's investigation found defects in battery cells produced at LG Chem's China facility. In some cases, Hyundai updated the battery management software to better detect problems. But eventually, the automaker committed to replacing the high-voltage battery on all affected units, a decision that cost over $1 billion. The Chevrolet Bolt situation was similar in origin, different in scale. GM issued a broad recall covering multiple model years, advising owners to limit charging to 90% and avoid overnight indoor parking until replacements could be completed. One Bolt owner described the experience this way. GM called and asked if they could have my battery for an engineering study. They offered me $250, the new battery, and a loaner vehicle. The dealer turned it around in one day. It was the second time they'd replaced my battery. That kind of outcome, a full replacement handled quickly under warranty, represents the system working. But what these recalls exposed was something the industry couldn't ignore. Even batteries that weren't being abused, even batteries in cars driven conservatively by owners, doing everything right, could fail because of what happened before the car ever left the factory. The real cost of battery problems. Battery problems don't just create mechanical headaches, they create a cascade of financial consequences that follow an owner long after the initial failure. The most immediate impact is reduced range. A battery that has degraded significantly doesn't just give you less distance per charge, it changes how you use the car entirely. Trips that were once comfortable become range anxiety trips. Charging stops that were optional become necessary. The car that fit your life no longer fits in the same way. The second consequence is resale value. Battery health is one of the first things an informed used EV buyer is going to check. A car with documented battery degradation or worse, a history of battery problems, takes a real hit in the private market. Between 2015 and 2024, average battery pack sizes increased by 167%, which means newer batteries have more capacity to lose before they become a problem. But older EVs with smaller origin packs have far less margin, and significant degradation shows up quickly in the numbers a buyer sees. The third consequence is repair cost. Outside of a warranty, battery replacement is expensive. While costs have been falling, packs hit a record low of around 108 per kilowatt hour in 2025. A full replacement in an older vehicle can still run into the thousands of dollars. For owners of early EVs who are now outside their warranty coverage, a battery that failed before 80,000 miles represents a financial problem with no easy answer. This is why battery health isn't a footnote in EV ownership. It's the central variable. Everything else about the car, the range, the value, the cost of ownership, runs through it. Why modern EV batteries are different. Here's what all of those failures actually produced. A generation of engineers who understood exactly what they had gotten wrong. Modern EV batteries are fundamentally different from the first generation systems, and the improvements are specific, not general. Thermal management is now standard at a level that simply didn't exist in early EVs. Liquid cooling systems actively regulate battery temperature during charging, driving, and storage. The pack doesn't just sit there absorbing whatever heat the environment throws at it. The system responds, adjusts, and keeps temperatures within the range where lithium-ion chemistry performs without accelerating degradation. Battery management software has become one of the most sophisticated pieces of technology in the vehicle. Modern systems monitor individual cell voltages and temperatures in real time, balance cells automatically, throttle fast charging when conditions aren't safe, and can push software updates over the air to improve battery protection without requiring a dealer visit. Tesla has done this repeatedly, improving charging behavior and protecting battery health through updates pushed to cars already in owners' driveways. Durability testing is now informed by a decade of real-world failure data that the first generation simply didn't have access to. Manufacturers know exactly how heat, fast charging, high states of charge, and cold temperatures affect cell chemistry over time. That knowledge is baked into the design of the pack, the behavior of the management system, and the chemistry of the cells themselves. The replacement rate for modern EVs from 2022 onward sits at 0.3%. That's not a rounding error compared to the 8.5% seen in first-generation vehicles. That's a fundamentally different product. What surprised me most about these failures? When you go through all of this data, the leaf degradation reports, the bolt and Kona recalls, the replacement rates by generation, the most striking thing isn't that some batteries failed. It's how precisely the industry identified why they failed, and how directly those lessons show up in the products being built today. The Leaf's passive thermal management problem didn't just result in a warranty update. It resulted in active liquid cooling becoming the standard across the industry. The manufacturing defects behind the Bolt and Kona recalls didn't just trigger billion-dollar replacements. They triggered a complete rethinking of cell production quality standards and field monitoring protocols. Battery scientists looking at degradation data found that heat, extreme states of charge, and high-power fast charging were the primary accelerants of capacity loss. And if you look at how modern battery management systems are designed, they are specifically engineered to manage all three, limiting charge rates in extreme temperatures, maintaining charge windows away from the edges, and throttling fast charging to protect the pack. The failures weren't just expensive. They were instructive in a way that changed the entire trajectory of EV battery development. Many of the best battery systems on the road today, the ones holding above 90% capacity after years of daily driving, exist in the form they do because of what went wrong with the ones that didn't make it to 80,000 miles. That's not a small thing. That's how engineering actually works when the stakes are high enough to force it. Drop a comment below. Did you own one of the early EVs, or know someone who did? And if this gave you a clearer picture of where the technology has come from and where it stands now, share it with someone who's still on the fence. The early failures are real history. So is everything that came after them.